last presentation. Oh, good, Louise. I didn't remember. Um, this is our last presentation for the 22-23 Virtual Travel Club year. We'll start up again in September, and just to give you an idea of what's on tap, September is Bhutan. We meet every other month, so there's nothing in October. November is Bali. January is Chile and Argentina. March is Spain, and May is still open. So I figured that's a full year away. I'm not going to be concerned about filling that this soon. But it looks like we have a really exciting year coming up, and who knows, maybe we'll get to the point that we do it in person. I guess we'll have to wait and see. So John and Brenda went to Costa Rica, from what I can tell from the screen, December 1st through 9th of 22, and they're going to tell us all about their trip. So John, it's up to you.
All right. Thank you for that nice introduction, Carol. Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome.
Now, if I could get the thing to just have to use my mouse button. Okay, so here's a table of contents. These are the things that we'll be covering: history, government, education, plants, birds, animals, food, transportation, and people. By the way, there's 100 slides, a little bit over, maybe 100, 109 slides. We can, if we average about 35 seconds per slide, we'll be do just fine. Some of the slides are only going to spend a few seconds. There's other ones we might want to spend a couple of minutes. On average, we'll probably be just fine. So I'll get everybody's bearings straight in case you don't know where Costa Rica is. On the left-hand map, it's the pink one down there. You can recognize United States and Mexico and South America and Central America. So that's where Costa Rica is. It's the next country north of Panama. The map on the right shows what it is a close-up view of Costa Rica within Central America.
1 degree from the equator.
Okay, now in this next one, the map on the left is what was published by Rhodes Scholar. I forgot to say that we took this trip with Rhodes Scholar. They've been a wonderful organization. I heartily recommend them. So they had published this map. We fly into the star, San Jose, that's the capital, and take a counterclockwise loop through the center of the country. So we never went up near Nicaragua, never went down near Panama, never went to the East Coast, but we still saw a lot. The map on the right is what I did on myself on the computer. There's a more detailed version of the same thing. So we're gonna have a little bit about the history. Now, there's some slides that are a little bit rich in the text, so we'll have to pause for a minute to give you time to read them. But I promise you, after we get past about the first dozen or 15 slides, then there's not so much text for you to read. So Costa Rica, Columbus reaches Costa Rica in 1502. They happen to have an iPhone there, so we have a picture. And I'll be quiet for a moment so you folks can read this.
And pre-Columbus, there were 2 major groups of Indians or native that were in the area.
Are we ready?
Wait a little longer.
All right, go to the next screen.
Good.
Some of these events appear to overlap things in America, don't they? Everybody ready?
Almost. I always give an extra minute. That's about right, John. Oh my, you've got a lot of reading here.
There won't be too many slides like this. And this is grossly condensed from the history that Rhodes Scholar gave us. All right, well, I think we'll move on to Costa Rican government. So election day is a big deal there. It's a national holiday, and you can see the parades here, people dressed up in costumes and make a big celebration out of election day. It'd be pretty cool if we did that here. By the way, they have two vice presidents. I don't know if I said that here.
I think you're okay, John.
Notice voting is compulsory.
But
Surprising, isn't it?
yeah, but not enforced. I found that interesting.
Oh, I forgot to mention the background of my presentation here with the red, white, and blue horizontal stripes are supposed to emulate the Costa Rican flag that has red, white, and blue horizontal stripes.
Okay.
So we did not visit a classroom in that trip. I got this picture from the internet. Could look like a classroom anywhere in the world, really.
But education, oh, all right, you've got a slide on that too. I forgot.
Okay, so the slides we've been through so far about Costa Rica. Now we're going to move into stuff that was specific to our trip. And we did have some challenges or adventures. It wasn't all just sitting back and watching the scenery go by. The tractor broke down. I'll talk about that. I'm afraid of heights, so the hanging bridges got my attention. A construction site, traffic on the way back, and Brenda's tow. We'll talk about all that. Carol, Stephanie is waiting to enter. So we visited an organic pineapple plantation, and we had a very interesting tour. I'd never seen how pineapples are grown, let alone organic pineapples. They took us through two different fields. It takes several months for pineapples to mature, so they showed us one field where they had just planted them recently, and there's not much to see except green sprouts coming up through the black plastic. Then they took us to another field that had more mature pineapples, so you could see what they're looking like, almost ready to harvest. And then the tractor broke down and the roads are muddy. So after we waited, the tractor broke down twice. The first time it broke down, they sent their mechanic who shows up on a motorcycle wearing flip-flops and carrying no tools. But he was able to get the tractor running again in a few minutes. But the second time it broke down, it took a long time for him to show up. So they finally had us hike out of there. So there's pictures of us hiking through the mud.
Okay,
I will
and
comment on
there
this.
were very few organic pineapples. This is a big experiment to try to, pineapples are very difficult to grow organically. And we learned that nearly everybody picks pineapples incorrectly. When you're looking for a good pineapple, you don't press it to see if it's soft, because that actually causes a bruise immediately. And you don't pull, as I was taught, to pull a center leaf, if you call them leaves, a center leaf out to see if it moves freely and comes out of the pineapple, because that doesn't guarantee you a fresh pineapple. Instead, you should look at the coloring and make sure that it is yellow and fairly even all over the pineapple, rather than be fairly often the top will be yellow and the rest won't. Anyway, so we learned how to pick a pineapple.
Yep, we made it a point to have a Costa Rican pineapple after we got back.
And we ate a lot of pineapple. We were on sort of a wagon being pulled by this tractor. And to entertain us in between while the mechanic was working on it and various people were looking at the tractor, the fellow kept cutting off more and passing around pineapples. So.
Yeah, he was pretty fast with his machete. I have a slide of that later on. Another challenge was the hanging bridges. I don't like heights. You can see the two pictures on the left. That's one of the members of our group, Bruce, and he walked across that bridge. That's before I got to it. Then you can see in the center picture, that's me. I was pretty nervous the first time going across that bridge, but I did it 3 times. I was less nervous the second time, and then the third time, I made it a point to look down through the grating, because it's scarier when you look down. So I thought if I could survive walking across it looking down, then maybe I'm ready for the bigger ones. The picture on the right is we went to the hanging forest, and one of these was 150 feet in the air, and that you see Brenda there with the right t-shirt.
They call them sky bridges in Spanish.
Oops. Road construction site. So the road was under construction. It was down to only 1 lane, and even that 1 lane was rather muddy and questionable. So I'm not quite sure why, but they had everybody get off the bus, and we walked across there on foot. And we
They
got
were
to
worried about our weight, John, the weight of the bus.
weight of the bus. Yeah, weight of
Yeah.
the people on the bus. What if the bus slips off? Well, better to do it empty.
Yeah.
Brenda was impressed by this man in the center carrying 2 bags of concrete on his back. Those are heavy bags.
But he got about 2/3 of the way down the hill and he slipped, and the concrete bags both fell, one of which poofed out of a lot of concrete. And the guy managed to just pick him up and keep going. They must have been 50 pounds each. They were huge.
Okay. The only other challenge here was the roads are not very good, and so sometimes the traffic is really bad. And so I took some pictures inside the bus, just getting from our last leg of the loop back to the headquarters, the capital city for our flight out the next day. It was 4 hours to not go that many miles. And so we entertained ourselves by telling jokes and so on. Oops. Michael, you'll appreciate this, and Christopher, if you're there, you'll appreciate this one. You had introduced us to the world's longest joke. So we found that on the phone, and Brenda read that long joke. It takes 20 minutes, I think, to tell that joke. That kept people going for a while. And we sang American Pie.
Anyway, the roads are good around the Capitol. John, I'm not hearing video. I'm not hearing sound.
Can you guys Can you guys hear the sound? Everybody?
Oh, no, we cannot.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
well then I
can't.
will not, I will skip this slide then. You would have got to hear me singing American Pie. Don't know if that's
So-
something you wanted to hear. That's
Is
too
that
bad.
because, will we miss the audio on your other videos as well then, or?
I don't think so. We'll just have to play that by ear.
Okay.
Sorry about that. We thought we had done a trial run. Carol and I and Dawn had done a trial run a couple of weeks ago and didn't have a problem then. Technology. All right, let's move along. Brenda's toe. So Brenda had an infection on one of her toes and it grew worse through the time that we were there. So she had to depend on these. On the right is a cane and on the left is a walking stick. And we learned that the cane is better when you're going uphill and the walking stick's better when you're going downhill. At one point, after we'd finished our travels for the day, I'd spoken to the tour guide, and so after everybody else got off the bus, he hijacked the bus. It's basically the tour guide and the driver and Brenda and myself, and he took us to a pharmacy. What Brenda really would have needed is an antibiotic, but they couldn't do that without a prescription. I had imagined that maybe in Costa Rica, the laws might be a little bit more lenient than they are in the US, so they might be able to give her something, but it was just like we were at home. So they were able to give her something for the.
No, it wasn't. I got some pretty good painkillers out of it that we would not get over the counter. So it helped a lot.
But it was, Brenda's toe was a challenge through the.
So I hobbled all over Costa Rica.
Too bad. Whitewater rafting, that was cool. Neither one of us has ever done that before. And they're very well done, professionally done. They took really good pictures. They gave us the email link to get at the pictures online before we'd even given them the money. We did give them the money. That was fun. We would do that again, I think. Okay, this section is about plants, so I'll be quiet for a moment so that you can see that list.
Are you going to talk about them, John?
Well, yeah, well, I have one slide for each one. Okay, so
Yeah.
the coffee and bananas are grown together. We didn't have an opportunity to take a good picture while we were there. So I found these pictures on the internet that came as close as I could do. The banana trees are on the right, and those two trees are quite tall, and they will shade the coffee plants, which are much lower plants. And the coffee plants need that shade, so that benefits the coffee plants. Then the coffee plant puts nitrogen into the soil, which the banana tree needs. So by planting these two plants next to each other, they benefit both of them. I thought that was interesting. Here's the pineapples that we were talking about before. So the center picture shows this man in the Hawaiian shirt. They have a kind of a cool way that they slice the pineapples. First they slice off some of the leaves, so the leaves makes a handle, then he has a handle to hold it by, and then they slice it and sort of offers it to you like a serving tray. I didn't have a picture of that. The other two pictures to the left, you can see the black plastic on the ground and the baby plants just starting to grow through it. This was really interesting.
One of the things the fellow pointed out to us was that a lot of people try to grow more pineapples by planting that top that they've cut off. And of course, they laugh at it because the way you grow another pineapple is all of those little eyes that you cut out and threw away. Those are all the seeds.
Peppercorn is a big crop there. I'm gonna have another picture of that later on. So the picture on the right is how you would see them if you would go to buy them in the store. And the picture in the center is a close-up of what they look like on the plant. And then the picture on the left is the plant itself.
And so quite a few places actually grow peppers as a fence for a fence line.
Segue into the next slide. And
Mhm.
so we have the planted fences. They'll take trees and they put them very close to each other and they trim them so there's no branches on the lower 3 or 4 feet. And then they can stretch some wire across it and they make a living fence. We saw this everywhere. Although in the end, none of our pictures were as good as the ones I was able to find on the internet. Here's sugar cane. So there's going to be a video of that. there's the tour guide is the top left, well, the tour guide of this particular event, talking about sugarcane. Then I volunteered in the middle picture. At each one of the joints in the sugarcane plant or stalk, you have to smack it with a mallet to soften that part of it. Then you put it into a press, and that's what the lower right picture is. You can see Brenda barely there. We have a video on the next slide. We'll find out if the sound works.
It was really hard cranking that too and twisting it.
So can you hear the sound?
Nope, no.
Sorry about that.
The other fruits in front of you there are also ones that are grown on that same plantation.
This one's called lipstick palm because it sort of resembles a lipstick container. We saw quite a few of these. Loofah tree. So you probably experienced those. You can buy them to use for, I don't know, washing your feet or something. And so that's how they grow. There's an emphasis in many places on growing one's own food. In the top right picture, the woman in the white with the red apron, her name was Hazel, and she led us into their house, and we spent an afternoon there. This is something that's all planned. And all the houses, at least in that area, have a large sheltered area out back. In the top left picture, you can see part of the roof. They call it a ranch. We might call it just a large patio.
It's
They'll
their
have a
kitchen.
roof, and then they'll have a stove out there, and they can do a lot of the food preparation there.
We actually had instructions by the daughter, the picture on the left, on how to make arepas, which are, oh dear, like a sweet, it's a bun that's mildly sweet. She made them with sour cream. They're often made with other things, and they're cooked on the griddle like you see in the center there. And then, well, it's not a griddle, it's called a comal, actually, if you know Spanish. And then they're popped into an oven type setting, or in this case, under the grill for a minute to heat them through more evenly. And on the right, she's making coffee and pouring it into a, looks kind of like a translucent sock. And that was a standard way to make coffee all around the country, on this tripod with a sock-like thing hanging there for the grounds.
Saw those everywhere.
Good coffee. And down below this, the government has encouraged that this was a visit to a lower income family, by the way. And they encourage people not just to in the rural areas to grow their own food, but to be as independent as they, self-sufficient as they can. So people share the crops that they've grown. This woman had, I think she said 27 kinds of fruit growing on her, probably maybe half an acre. It wasn't very much, it wasn't a lot of land. And she had a couple of cows, as you see, and the calves were, she was getting ready, she was going to be selling them as they got a little older. And part of her income, of course, was feeding us and giving us a tour of the, I'm sure that the company paid them to do the demonstration and speak to us.
Okay, thank you, Brenda. So they make a lot about cloud forest and rainforest, so I'll stop there for a moment. That's the one on the left was inspirational. Children from, I think it was the Netherlands or some other part of the world.
It was one child, one little girl from Sweden that started the Children's Eternal Rainforest.
And now they have 55,000 acres. Oh, there was a lot of talk about epiphytes and bromeliads. That was new to me, so I'll pause here. And we saw this in a number of places. There would be plants growing on the walls.
This is the
Right.
wall of a hotel.
Yeah.
The hotel garages were enclosed by gates, and you sort of drove into the hotel. And this was one wall, and on the right was another wall of that hotel. So the cars and so on all were parked inside, sheltered, and then you just stepped out of your car and you were in the lobby.
Yep. Strangler figs, this is new to me. These start as small trees that grow up next to a larger tree, and as these smaller trees mature, they completely surround the host tree and eventually suffocate the host tree. And then the host tree dies, and over the years it will rot out, and then these strangler fig trees are hollow on the inside. In the lower left, you can see our tour guide inside the tree smiling out at us. The two pictures on the bottom right are from inside the tree looking up, trying to show how hollow it is. You could walk inside there. You could probably fit 2 or 3 people inside there. I've never seen that before. He said that when he was a kid, he and his friends would climb trees from the inside. So that's it for plants. We're going to move on to birds. I'm not that much interested in birds, although I became more interested because it turned out that our tour guide is really interested in birds, and a lot of people that were in our tour group were interested in birds, and so they were talking about birds all the time. And these are some of the names that were mentioned, but there are others that went past me. These were really spectacular birds. He called them flying bananas because their beaks look kind of like a banana. And there are different types of toucans. I have 2 of them here. Hummingbirds are a big deal there.
35 different types of hummingbirds in Costa Rica. What happens that John didn't explain is that our migratory birds go to, so many of them go to Central America, but also the migratory birds coming out of Brazil, Chile, and Argentina go north to Central America. So there's a huge bird population and huge variety.
Thanks, Brenda. Yeah, to support what Brenda just said, bird feeders are everywhere, but I don't think one picture, but they are everywhere.
Every family, every hotel, everywhere you look, there are bird feeders.
This bird, honey creeper, was new to me. I got these pictures from the internet. There's a couple of different colorations here, and there's probably more, but they were everywhere. When the people are calling out the birds, they would always mention the honey creeper, and the other one that they mentioned a lot was the tanager or tanager. That one has different types. I'm not sure which type was in Costa Rica. If you are more knowledgeable about birds than I am, then you know more about this than I do. But
Or tanagers in Minnesota. I know that. I don't know about Missouri.
they got so much mention, I had to include a slide for the tanager. Then there's a
The
quetzal.
quetzal is the most famous, I think, because of that enormous long tail, and it's endemic to Central America. It doesn't live anywhere else.
One called the guan. It's and that's also endemic to that area. Turkey like. I'm not sure if we saw one of those.
Yes, we did. It's a relative of a turkey. It's their closest thing to a turkey, and they used to eat them, but the government, as part of the taking care of the environment, it's now illegal to kill an animal or a bird like this. The wild species are very much protected.
Okay, so that's it for birds. You could have spent an entire hour on the birds themselves. I'm sure there are people that do that. I'm going to move along to animals now. I know you could argue that birds are a type of animal, but I'm separating them. So there's 15 different types of animals I'm going to present here. The howler monkeys were something. They are well named. I'd had a video that I got from National Geographic, but then it wouldn't play correctly. Now apparently there's an audio issue as well. But their name is a very, very appropriate name. They make noise, and you can hear that from some distance away.
And they really scream.
Yeah, or howl. Sloths, they're popular everywhere. They go very slowly. We didn't actually
kinds of
see
sloths too.
on the trees. Say again, Brenda.
There are 2 types of sloth.
Right, I don't think I went into
There's a
that.
two-toed sloth and a three-toed sloth, and they're very different in their customs and their mating and all kinds of things.
Yep, and you see those signs, the 0.01 kilometer per hour. So I had to do the conversions from miles per hour, inches per minute for us Americans. River otter, I've never seen one in the wild. I know a lot of people have, but I've never seen a river otter in the wild. I've only seen them in zoos. So it was pretty
Until
cool.
we got there. You saw one there.
Right there, yeah.
Yep.
This is my first, okay, I shouldn't say never, now I have.
Yes. This is one of our 2 river trips.
Cayman, that was pretty cool. He never moved. We joke he was made of plastic and they just planted it there. The captain maneuvered the boat up pretty close there. But that one at the bottom, a close up of the eye, that's because we had a good camera, which broke partway through the trip. We wouldn't have had this picture without a real camera. You can't do that with a phone. At least I don't think I could.
But it was real because suddenly it took off.
Yeah. Later on, when the boat went up the river, then turned around, when we came back, we looked for him and he was gone by that time. Iguana sitting in a tree. These guys are big.
If you
Water
have to-
possum. Did you want to go back?
Oh, make sure that the iguana is on the limb of the tree near the joint.
Yeah. It's right here. I don't know if you can see me moving my mouse. This is where the
And
iguana.
they were several feet long. When I lived in Spain, we used to have a problem because the iguanas would go marching around the Naval Air Station and pick up all the cigarette butts and smoke them. They were addicted.
This one, I'd never heard of a water possum. The picture on the right is one I found on the internet. He's a lighter color. The one on the left, I took that picture. I was on one of the walking paths in the evening and I saw this crazy guy. So I took a picture. I didn't know what it was. So later on, I showed the picture to people and they identified it for me. Water possum. They're not uncommon there. They have chickens. So the picture in the top center is actually taken in the hotel lobby. The lobby is open to the outdoors, so there's nothing preventing a chicken from walking into the lobby. It's just not something you would expect to see. The natives take it in stride. To us, we thought it was unusual.
Okay, Stephanie, they picked up the cigarettes that were right after people had dumped them, had tossed them. Yeah, that was from the chat. I was intrigued with the chickens. I didn't know that a chicken would just dig a hole and roost in the ground. But this is just as we pass by somebody's home, and typical, all kinds of birds and little bitty house, but quite a variety of wildlife.
Yeah, I thought it was unusual. This chicken natives. I don't know if he made the hole or he just took advantage of a hole that existed for some other reason.
Yeah, that's a chicken on the right. That little brown spot is a chicken roosting in the grass in a hole.
Leafcutter ants. That was pretty cool. I'd seen pictures of them, hadn't seen them in real life. So we stayed there for some time watching them. And here's a video. There won't be any audio, but there's not much audio with an ant crawling around.
And the leafcutter ants make huge nests that at the bases of trees, just as big as a small car. And they say the leafcutters that they've figured out that the population of leafcutters in Costa Rica is several times the population of humans.
Okay, that was cool.
Like you focused on one ant, but there
Well, there were a lot. Well,
they came in long parades.
we did. Yeah, Brenda's right. We did take several videos of the leafcutter ants, and on some of those, they are a swarm of ants. I picked this video because it was more zoomed in. You can actually see the ant. So I thought that was maybe the better one for a presentation.
And they'll carry things that are bigger than they are.
Yeah. Okay, the house that we talked about earlier, the house and cows, I put videos of cows in here, but Brenda says maybe people have already seen cows, so I don't need to show those videos.
But we did find out that they changed the type of cows. We'll tell you about later in one area.
Okay. This animal is called a coati. That was wild. That was new to me. It's kind of raccoon-like, but larger. They're not uncommon. I was really surprised to see this come walking in, and we're in the trailhead here. There's a building with restrooms and I don't know, a gift shop, that kind of stuff. and he just came waltzing through around all the people, and he wasn't scared of the people, and the natives
Pretty
weren't.
much like our squirrels, just looking for something to munch and wandering around.
Unusual animal. Bats. We went to a place called the Bat Jungle. And they had basically a hallway. They call it the Bat Jungle. I think they could have called it the Bat Hallway because it wasn't a complete jungle. It was kind of small, but you would go down a dark hallway and you could look through the glass and see all sorts of different types of bats. Some are single, some are in clusters, different types of bats, all in the same place. And the woman talked for 20 minutes about everything that they know about bats. So there's a lot to know about bats. Then we went to another place, talked about cockroaches and other insects and butterflies. They called this one the butterfly house or butterfly garden or something to that effect. But I actually thought the part about cockroaches and the other insects is more interesting. On the bottom right, you can see handbags made to look like bugs. We didn't buy one.
I didn't bring one home as a souvenir.
Here are the butterflies, and the picture on the top left, the guy picks it up, you hold the butterfly by its wings. Hard to get pictures of butterflies. When you get near, they fly away.
And the person doing it was doing postgraduate work from somewhere in England. I've forgotten where, in Costa Rica.
And this is my favorite cat. I love cats, and we only saw one cat on our whole trip. And so it was out in the parking lot while we were waiting to get on a boat. So I picked up the kit and then cuddled it, and Brenda did the same thing. And then Brenda noticed a woman 15 feet away watching us very carefully. So maybe she was the cat's owner, but I think she could tell that we love the kitties. So that was a high note. On a lower note, there's the golden toad. That species has gone extinct just in the last few decades. And they can trace that to global warming. It has altered the habitat enough that this toad can no longer survive. And so in Costa Rica, everyone is familiar with the story of the golden toad, and they treat it as a warning sign that we need to take this subject more carefully.
And we saw T-shirts that had pictures of them and said, "The golden toad, may they never be forgotten."
Mm.
We did not hear. Stephanie is asking the chat, are they experiencing white-nosed bat syndrome? They knew about it and they have not had trouble with it, the die-offs. So it's still a stable population of bats.
Good question. Good answer. Thank you. Moving on to food. Locally grown, fresh, natural. There's something called gallo pinto in almost every meal. I'll have each one of these bullet points has its own slide. So we'll move along. So this wasn't something they hadn't planned. We had gone to a restaurant for lunch, but it was in a small shopping center and there was a grocery store. So when lunch was over, we prevailed upon the tour guide to let us go into the grocery store. And I'm glad we did. It was similar to an American grocery store, but it was different. And one of the differences that I want to point out here is the produce section. In modern American grocery stores, we have what I just said, a produce section. Here, it's the major part of the store. Gallo pinto. So you can see this dish is based on rice, and it has beans and some other things in there. And it's with almost every meal. It's a standard.
And the seasoning is something called salsa Lizano, Lizano. I forgot the first name, but Mr. Lizano years ago developed it in Costa Rica, and it has become, well, it's endemic. The people use it in all kinds of things. It's very tasty. You can buy it in the little Mexicans and other the immigrant stores around here. I bought a couple of them just recently. It's a mixture of vegetables and spices. It's a little like Worcestershire sauce, but better. Very good.
It was good. Those of you who know me know that I have celiac disease, so I have to eat gluten-free food. And that was usually not a problem. I did have a couple of bumps in the road, but for the most part, I'd go someplace and need gluten-free food, and it was no problem.
And it was labeled pretty clearly.
Yeah.
Because all of the food that we ate pretty much was made fresh. There really were not breaded things and deep fried things, so we didn't have to worry much at all.
Sodas was the expression they used for these outdoor cafes. We were in a number of them. You can maybe get a better overview in the picture on the bottom right. That's from the parking lot. We stopped for lunch at a couple of these things more than once. So that picture on the left is our group. One of them even had a cradle there, or a crib.
And
So
a baby.
one of the
You need to say why, John. They were called sodas because years ago you'd have a few posts and a corrugated roof, and that was where you could get a cold Coke or a cold soda of some sort. And because of that, as they became restaurants, they're still called sodas.
Yep. And they're often family owned. So in this case, the family had a baby, so they had a crib there for the baby.
And there's some Lisano sauce on the counter there, I see.
Okay. This one was impressive. The Quakers and the cheese making. There's a long story about how American Quakers moved from America to Costa Rica because they felt that the culture of Costa Rica was more in keeping with their religious beliefs. So they moved there and they set up their own community. They looked for what type of industry they could start on, and they decided that cheese making would best be the best choice for them. And so there's a whole cheese making culture there. We had a woman that talked for an evening about that subject. You could hear a pin drop. Everybody listened to every word she had to say. I can't go into all of that now. I don't think I can remember it all, but that you could spend an hour easily right there just on the Quakers and cheese making.
They were from Fairholme, Alabama, and the men, back when the U.S. instituted the mandatory draft, the men, because they wouldn't sign up for the draft, had to spend a year and a day in jail. And when they got out of jail, they gathered up their families and moved them to Costa Rica, because that was just when Oscar Arias had disbanded the military and declared peace.
Yep.
There's a quick summary.
Thank you, Brenda.
They moved to the mountains to be out of the way.
And so there's this story about my French fries. So I said that finding gluten-free wasn't usually a problem, but one time it was. So they had, and the language barrier didn't help. Even though Brenda speaks fluent Spanish, he wasn't necessarily next to me every second. And so something kind of went wrong here. They gave me some French fries. I could tell that they were prepared the same way as everybody else's French fries that had a seasoning on them. And I learned earlier in the trip to stay away from the French fries with the seasoning. So I simply wasn't going to have French fries. But through the language imperfections there, that message didn't come through accurately. And instead, just as they're bringing everybody else their dessert, they brought me this entire plate of French fries. And since I'd gone to this effort to make it for me, especially for me, I felt I really had to eat it all. And it was an effort because this is after having a full meal. So I was able to get down all these French fries except two. And when the guy across from us took our picture for us.
Yeah, that was funny. That's when I let John do the deal with the interpreting with the waiter. We have a question from Adam. Are the Quakers still living in the community, or is it purely historical? No, the Quakers are still there. They still have the cheese business. They also make ice cream and some other things. And that's where the cows came in. I mentioned they changed, because they're up in the mountains, they changed the type of cow to the Brahman cow that is better. It isn't as gassy, so it's better for the environment. It doesn't produce as much as much carbon dioxide. So they changed type of cows, and they actually have an environmentally sound farm growing the cows, or where they grow the cows for the cheese.
Yep, we'll move on from food to culture. Each one of these points here has its own slide. Some of these are big deals, some of them are small. So they did this. This is one of the things they do for tourists. I don't know how often the locals go out to watch these three young women dance. And so they did a dance for maybe 20 minutes, a half an hour for us. There's
It was representing the Caribbean side. We had other dancers for the Western side. Sorry, there's no sound. John, that's probably enough since there's no sound.
Okay. Tourism culture. Those hard to get pictures here, but these two young women, I thought maybe exemplified it as well as anybody else could. The tourism is their culture. It's the main industry in their country, and everybody there takes it seriously. It's not just a job that you do while you hope for a better job to come along, or something to do while you're going through school or something like that. It's a deep part of the culture, and everybody there is friendly to tourists. And I got the feeling it wasn't just people being polite. It was, this is who they are. They love the tourist, and it's an important part of their culture. I enjoyed that. Do you want to add anything, Brenda?
Actually, there are tourism classes taught in the high schools and in middle school now, and they're teaching English in lower and lower levels. So that pretty soon they hope that most everybody will be able to communicate with the tourists. They're also teaching some German. I don't know about other languages.
Yeah, most people speak Spanish. That's language barrier that I talked about with the French fries. Those events are pretty rare.
Yeah.
So
They
they
haven't mentioned that they call themselves Ticos, short for Costa Rican, Tico.
Yeah, it's like we might say Yankee. This picture here shows an outdoor sink. These things were everywhere. I don't know that they were part of these spawned up because of COVID, or were they there prior to COVID? I don't know, but everywhere you'd go, you would see these little simple outdoor sinks, and you could wash your hands anywhere. Not used to seeing that.
Many of them had a foot treadle, and they were at every bus stop, for instance.
Now, this doesn't look remarkable. It's just a picture. It's just a toilet. But notice that it has a wastebasket next to it. That doesn't seem remarkable, but they give you instructions. They ask that when you use the toilet and you use the toilet paper, that you don't flush the toilet paper, that you instead put the toilet paper in the wastebasket. Apparently, their plumbing in some places is not up to snuff. So if you flush too much toilet paper down the plumbing, you could have problems. We did forget a couple of times, but it didn't cause any problems. We did one time have a toilet get clogged, but we hadn't made any mistakes of that sort, so it must have been ready to clog anyway. But that's unusual, putting the toilet paper in a wastebasket.
It was part of their environmental concerns. They were trying to both save water and save having to build large sewage treatment plants.
And speaking of environmental concern, these rural sidewalks, they're trying to put more and more sidewalks in to encourage people to walk to the local store rather than using a car.
So they were building sidewalks from town to town. Another question from Stephanie: what was the water source for the sinks? So a few of them were plumbed, and some of them were in containers, but I think most of them were plumbed.
Yeah, I didn't notice the containers. The water quality is very good everywhere we went.
By the way, there's a joke. I don't think John included in here. How to make a town in Costa Rica, John? Did you put that in?
No, why don't you?
If you want to start a town in Costa Rica, you start by clearing out some trees so you can have a soccer field. And next to the soccer field, somebody will build a church. And then on the other side of the soccer field, somebody will build a school, and you'll have your town.
Don't forget the bar.
Everywhere we went, it was the same thing. The church, the school, and the soccer field, all right together, all in use.
Yep. Brenda mentioned this a moment ago, environmental education. You can get a degree in environmental education or tourism and things of that sort. This was not a picture on our trip. I got this from the internet. But it's something that they do.
Everybody knew about the water cycle and what's happening with the issues with the rainforest and with global warming.
I get this picture from the internet as well, but they do teach English in every schools because they know their economy hinges on tourism, and they want to make sure that everybody is prepared to communicate with the tourist.
And what they did to make this extra, just to give you an idea of what the government has decided to do, in order to support the rural communities, they've done things like those hand washing stations, but they started teaching English in the rural areas first before they bothered dealing with the cities. They figured I guess they figured originally the cities must have had better access to it, but I was impressed that they started it there.
This is something unusual. You saw part of this before when I talked about the plants on the walls, and Brenda mentioned this. They park the cars and the bus in the hotel courtyards. At nighttime, the vehicles are locked behind a gate. I don't know if it's because of high crime, because you didn't hear much about crime, but that was the norm. Everywhere we went, there'd be a courtyard and you park the vehicles inside there.
In the capital, crime-wise, in the capital, they said they're having some trouble because of drugs with purse snatching. That was a person stuff you could sell, grabbing from people.
And here's more plants on the walls. I've mentioned that before, but that's just one more. It's part of their culture. This photograph I showed before when we talked about the tractor breakdown, but this time I gave it the caption non-litigious. And I'll talk about what I meant by that. Those of you who know me know that decades ago I was a mechanic, and I'm still mechanically inclined. I'm a mechanical engineer now. I do repairs on my own cars and things of that sort. So when the tractor broke down, and after 15-20 minutes of messing with it, they were not able to get it running, I climbed down out of the trailer, and I'm standing on the trailer hitch right there, and I stuck my head in there to see if there might be anything that I could do to help. In the end, I was not able to. I was just looking at a bank of electronics, and I didn't really know what I was looking at. But what impressed me about this event didn't have to do with the actual nuts and bolts of the tractor. If this had happened in America, there would have been a security guard who would have told me to get back in my seat. That did not happen here. They welcomed me. I said I might know something about this, and said, okay, we need some help. And they allowed me to roll up my sleeves and get right in there and try to help. That would not happen in America. That made an impression on me. Now, I'm going to talk about transportation. I said I work on my own cars and stuff. I used to be a mechanic. So this is an interest of mine. And in many of these presentations, there isn't much about that. So I'm going to have a section in here. We have roads. Around the Capitol is the Pan American Highway. The roads are good around the Capitol. The Pan American Highway runs right through the country. It's good, but most of the roads are narrow. Many of them are unpaved. They have very few trains. I'm not sure why. Maybe it's because the terrain is so hard. Maybe because trains and train tracks are expensive.
The only train track goes east-west across the country, and it was built when United Fruit Company was going to be trying to do more exporting.
But it's only one train, so it's not really a network, so it's of limited use. This is the bus that we traveled on. It's a 2015 Toyota Costa. I think I've never heard of that model before. A vehicle that big that could carry 18 people, only had a 4-cylinder engine, 4-liter, that's 244 cubic inches. It's an intercooled turbo diesel, has approximately 100,000 miles. It's a manual transmission. I failed to get a picture, but it has a turbo boost kit. That allows the turbo to kick in when you're going up hills or trying to pass another car or something. In the driver is in this picture on here in the red shirt. All the luggage went on top of the bus. So at every hotel, they had to unload the stuff. And they get help from the bellhop at the hotel. This picture down here in the bottom, just to the right of center, is a snorkel. A lot of the vehicles had those. Not half of them, but maybe 10% of the vehicles have a snorkel. So maybe sometimes the water gets so deep that a snorkel is a good idea. So that's the bus. Motorcycles. These things were everywhere. The most common configuration that you would see is 1-cylinder, 125cc, carbureted as opposed to fuel injection. They're what in America we call the enduro style. I don't know if that word translates. Enduro, for those who aren't familiar with motorcycles, means a motorcycle that's capable of going off-road. You'll notice these bikes have kind of a high ground clearance in most cases, and they have knobby tires. So you can go on dirt roads, but they also had headlights and turn signals and a license plate and things of that sort, so that you can ride them on public roads as well. The picture on the bottom right is a little bit fuzzy. Brenda took that picture. That's me there. This is the same shopping center where we got to go in the grocery store. I had seen motorcycles everywhere. As you can see, I took pictures of the motorcycles, but this was the only opportunity I had to talk to one of the riders. And so I spent 5 minutes having a chat with him about motorcycle culture in Costa Rica. So that's it for the motorcycles.
With the guy who didn't speak English and John doesn't speak Spanish. John, we have a couple of questions. One is, do they use biodiesel? How do fuel costs compare to the US? Another one was the engine in the front of the bus, assuming so, given the snorkel placement.
Yes, the engine was in the front of the bus, sort of between the front seats.
And biodiesel fuel costs?
I don't know. I gather the fuel is expensive because these motorcycles are everywhere because they're economical transportation. They're not, in America, motorcycles are considered toys. It's something a person takes out on the weekend to go for a ride in the country. But in Costa Rica and in other countries, motorcycles are considered economical transportation. And the next slide, I took these pictures from the internet, but you all recognize these kinds of cars as Fiat. There's just the small economy boxes, small sedans, Toyota Corolla, Honda Fit, things of that sort, Toyota Echo, which is smaller than the Corolla. Those cars were everywhere. You wouldn't see a Chevy Impala or something like that, or a Crown Vic or something like that. The word in Spanish, auto alto, means high cars, that high car or tall car. So it's their closest they get to SUVs. And these are the smaller SUVs like the Toyota RAV4, Nissan, Honda CR-V, and that sort of thing. What you don't see is this. These vehicles that are all over America, I never saw one. And alas, we did not see this. I've wanted a Mazda Miata for 30 years, and I finally got my Miata just recently, just shortly before this trip started.
Hey,
I
John.
was still excited about that. So in the entire trip, when we're going down the roads, I'd keep my eyes open for another Miata. I never saw one. But I guess it doesn't fit the rough roads that they have around there. This was a little bit of a surprise. When I learned how rough the terrain is and how bad the roads are and how they have a need to get from one location to another, it sounds like Alaska. In Alaska, there are bush plains everywhere, the big pudgy tires, and they can land in unimproved areas. So it would seem that bush plains could be very useful in Costa Rica. I never heard of one, or not only did I not see any bush plains, very few small plains at all. Now we're going to talk about people, and this is the last major section of this presentation. So these are all the people that we met on our trip, and I'm going to give one slide to each one of them.
Awesome.
And the first one is Andre Acosta, tour guide extraordinaire. The man was amazing. He understood the culture, he understood the country, he understood his guest, he understood the language.
And he's a master birder.
Say again?
And he's a master birder.
Yep. He had a high-powered binocular, and he'd find the birds, and then once he found the bird, then he'd step aside and let everybody else look through his periscope, not periscope, telescope on a tripod. He was wonderful.
Here he's showing how the leaves are shaped so that they grasp the water and hold it for the plant.
And that I selected this. We had a lot of pictures of him. I picked this one because it kind of shows him in his most natural position. He's explaining something to us. I like this guy. We only got to see him for an hour or two. It was the first morning of our first full day. He spoke about the politics and the culture, the government, and that sort of thing. And honestly, I could have listened to him for several more hours.
By the way, Costa Rica is one of the things we learned from him. It's only the size of West Virginia.
This woman gave us a tour of the Gold Museum. That was the first really touristy thing that we did on the morning of our first day as well. This one was more fun. Friday lunch. The woman in the plaid here, the second from the left, is the matriarch of the family. The two young women on either side are her daughters. The woman on the far right is her best friend, who she describes as a sister of the heart, which I thought was a fun phrase. They gave us a great lunch. She used to be a Rhodes Scholar guide. One thing that doesn't show in the picture is they have a fence around their property with barbed wire at the top, which I thought was to keep out thieves, but it's
A
not. It's to keep out
12-foot fence.
jaguars.
It was because the jaguars kept eating their dogs.
This woman, Yahira Duran, a naturalist, she's the one that identified that water possum for me. When I saw that strange animal, I didn't know what it was. You saw a picture of these folks before. The white blouse is Hazel, and then the woman standing up here is her daughter. They live in the rural area. Rancho, that's the word I was thinking of. Their outdoor porch. You can see a little bit more of that here. He was very proud of their bridge. They settled this community. All of these families simultaneously came into this area as a group, and they settled on either side of a river, and so they built a bridge across the river. And the first one was just a single lane walking bridge. The second one was large enough that you could drive a Jeep through it. That got wiped out in a hurricane.
No, I got wiped out with the when the volcano erupted.
The volcano. The
Yeah.
volcano came down the mountain and knocked down the trees, and the trees flowed down the river and knocked out their bridge.
Blocked the street, yeah.
And then the current bridge is a World War II surplus, so it's way past its service life, but it's still doing just fine.
And
And
her
the-
land was actually on both sides of that stream.
So they need the bridge. The young dancers, that was our entertainment one night. There's a video on the next slide. Don't think I'll bother to show that because we're running a bit long and there's no sound. Daniel, the organic pineapple man, he was energetic, charismatic, proud. When he saw we were taking this picture, he had to pose with the machete. He claims he's not a machete murderer. We'll never know for sure. This woman told us all about volcanoes. We never did get really, really close to the volcano, but we were, say, in the foothills of the volcano, and she spent an hour explaining the history of the volcanoes and the geology and so on.
Costa Rica is basically surrounded by volcanoes, but only, I think, 3 of them are active.
This man gave us a tour of an organic farm. I showed you the video earlier of the sugar cane that Brenda was helping out with. That it was grown on that farm. There's yellow fruit. I forget the name. You don't want to eat that. If you do, it will give you a heart attack. So
It's nitroglycerin's made from it.
But fun fact, there's a coffee tour guide. He spoke very good English. We asked him how he learned to speak English so well, and he said that he learned it in jail. And we weren't sure whether he was joking or not, but he gave us a very good tour. This lady here, Flory Rockwell, she was part of the Quaker community. She was native to Costa Rica. She married one of the Quaker men that had settled there, and they had a very good life together. They had several different businesses, a hotel for a while, and she went through the story of their community, but she's also telling the story of their life because they're so intertwined with their community. You can't tell one story without telling the other story as well. A remarkable woman. Her husband had died only months before this trip, and she's in her 80s, and you could understand if maybe she wanted to use that as her occasion to retire, but she didn't. You see that smile, she's still happy to meet tourists and tell her story, and we're glad that she did.
And served us a wonderful meal.
Yep. Batwoman, that's my name for her. She talked about bats, and you already saw the pictures of the bats. Cockroach man, we already talked about the cockroaches and the bugs. Sarah Stuckey, spend a moment on her. If there's anybody in the audience here today, I can't see the names of everybody. Is anybody from the Climate Action Now group here in St. Louis? Maybe we want to see if we can approach her. She presented for an hour on climate change and the work that she is doing on her own farm and a few other farms in that area. She had a PowerPoint presentation, and she's clearly studied this matter in great detail. She has lots of data to share. She was
masterful.
Not doing enough, right? And that's how we all should feel. Romel, the bus driver, There he is up there in the red shirt. He drove us everywhere. We tipped him at the end. We're almost at the end, everybody. This is our group. So along the bottom, there's the names of everybody. Here's Brenda right here, and that's me right next to her. Here's our tour guide, Andre, right here. And I did this shortly after the trip while I still remembered everybody's names.
And we're
I
standing in front of one strangler fig tree.
Yeah, see how big the tree is?
Half of us could have gone inside it.
And back home again. That's it, everybody. I
And
know I
straight
ran
to
over
urgent
late.
care for me. And the t-shirt that we're wearing tonight and that you saw on the trip have, well, John, why don't you talk about them? They say pura vida was an idiom that everybody used in Costa Rica. It means pure life. It means live well, that kind of thing. And it has a Costa Rican license plate on it and pineapples on the front of an old Volkswagen bus.
Yeah, and I like Volkswagen, so when I saw that, that's the t-shirt we had to get. Any questions from the group?
Yeah, John and Brenda, that was absolutely fantastic. And I've been to Costa Rica, but learned so much from your presentation. And I was going to ask you if you were willing to entertain questions, but it sounds like you already answered that you're willing to stick around for questions. So, Louise, can you unmute people so that or
Yeah,
allow them
people
to?
can, I just allowed them to unmute themselves.
Fabulous. So if I have questions, but I'd like to let everybody else have a chance first.
Also,
Would we like to stop the recording before the questions or keep it going?
I don't care.
Keep it going.
I'd keep it
Okay.
going.
Yeah,
Okay,
right.
just checking.
Well, I do have a comment. Pura vida.
Pura vida.
That's pura vida. Yes.
That's the expression.
Yes.
I'm pronouncing it like an American. Well, I'll have to depend on Brenda.
Well, if you can do it better with Spanish, go right ahead.
Pura vida.
So, do people have questions? John, I think it would be good if you stopped sharing.
John, you have a comment from Lauren. She says, oops, she said we have strangler, I just lost it. That they have strangler figs in Florida where she is, but they call them banyan trees. I'm not sure. I think those may be different, but they're amazing.
I haven't been monitoring the chat as how I see it.
I think I've caught up with them, John.
Say again?
I think I've caught up with them.
Okay.
Jenny has her hand up.
Hi, Jenny.
Hi. So I would love it if you could each say, what was the thing that most surprised you, that you were least expecting? Can you pick out one thing?
John?
I think this is going to sound small, but it's when the tractor broke down and I tried to help them fix it and they didn't shoo me away.
Yeah, thank you.
I could talk about the hanging bridges too, because I don't like heights. When one of these bridges went 150 feet, but I did it. But that's not the main memory I take away.
Thank you. Brenda?
I kind of knew what I was getting into because I studied it a bit. And of course, I've lived in Spanish speaking cultures. But I was impressed at the openness and sincerity of the people seemed happy. Everybody we met was happy. They might be talking about terrible things, the global warming issues for the farmers up in the rainforests, but they still were basically happy with their lives.
Thank you.
Hey guys, I bought a shirt in Costa Rica, and I don't know if you can make out the lettering.
Pura vida.
Pura vida, P-U-R-A-V-I-D-A, Pura vida, and Save the Rainforest. It's
Oh,
my
cool! I like it.
favorite T-shirts.
I like that.
Pura
Yes.
vida.
Pura vida is definitely, if you hear that from somebody, you can identify them as a Costa Rican, basically. And it's used as a greeting, as a comment. It's used as a farewell, all kinds of things. I was surprised how often people used it.
Yeah.
Good luck. Best wishes.
Yeah.
So I have some questions. One, because I live in downtown St. Louis. Did you hear any mention of guns? Did you see guns? Was there
No,
anything to do with guns?
no,
Never heard that word. There's one
no.
anecdote that is, it's terrible that your question about guns makes my mind go in this direction. But we were on the tour bus one day, driving back to our destination, and one woman looks at her phone and she reported a headline that the Trump organization was on trial in New York City and had been found guilty on all 17 counts. When she read that out loud, there was a massive applause on the entire bus. We knew that we were in good company then.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Another question I have is, you mentioned that there were bird feeders every place.
Mhm.
You know why? In other words, are the birds not able on their own
Oh.
to?
They have such a huge number of birds because of the migration in everywhere. And it's just a way people are very respectful of the environment and the animals around them, and they're encouraged to keep, to be part of their own environment, to be responsible for it. And it just seems to be the thing to do. That even in poor areas, we would see, you would see bird feeders in use.
It might be they just like the birds too, and the bird feeders will attract them, so they get to see the birds up close.
That's an advantage. So my third question and my final question is, it appears to me that living in Costa Rica would be a lower stress style of life than what's in this country. Is that just
We didn't live
wrong?
there. We spent 1 week. There are a lot of Americans who move there. I did read some articles on the subject. One of them said there's a popular notion if the candidate you don't like wins the presidency, I'm going to move to another country, and so they move to Costa Rica. But when they interview people, Americans or that have moved to Costa Rica or other countries, very, very rarely did they move because of a political motivation. They went to another country for the adventure, fell in love with the place, ended up staying. Another point we saw, and I didn't follow this YouTube video, but this woman, a realtor who sells houses to the Americans that move to Costa Rica, so she gets to know their stories. She said that Americans will move to Costa Rica full of excitement about this new place that they're going to, and after 8 or 10 years, they end up moving back to the States. I did not watch the whole video to find out what was behind that. Is it just homesickness, or they become disillusioned about other things? I don't know.
What I was told was that returning to family, to be around family. And there is a large retirement community of Americans and Canadians as well. As I understand it, many of them stay, they go thinking they'll stay there, a few years, but some of them stay on because they've got good nationalized medical coverage.
I see we have a couple of hands up. Adam and Stephanie, when do you want to go?
I'll go.
Hi, Adam.
Hi, I was inspired by your interaction with the climate activist and wanted to ask if you received any information from her or other sources about Costa Rica's energy portfolio, like from where they got their electricity, how they expected that to change, and also feeding off of that and thinking about like the ranchos and like the kitchen out there. It looked like it was like a wood-fired
I think it
grill.
was.
How perhaps you noticed maybe like shifts in like building electrification based on their climate concerns.
There is some solar. There are not many windmills, but they built a huge. They dammed a lake, and around kind of between two volcanoes, and there's one large lake that they're using for hydro for the whole country, pretty much for power. It's something like 85% of their power is from this one hydro area.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it's a lot.
She
And
did.
the plan is to be completely self-sufficient and non-injurious to the environment by 2050. They want to be 100% essentially off grid from what we think of it.
Wow.
I did have a slide that showed a pie graph of where the various sources of energy. I don't remember the details though.
That was part of the Sarah Stuckey's talk, was she had all that information. She was amazing.
Well, good for them. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Stephanie?
Stephanie? Oh, you're muted, Steph.
I know, I was trying to find the mute button on my phone. I don't usually do this on my phone. I was curious, back to the birds, thinking about birds, and I assume that there were also a lot of beehives. I think I remember Mom telling me about that.
Yeah.
And I was wondering about bears. I didn't hear anything about bears in the animal section. So is that not an issue, or can they feed birds without having to worry about their
Well, I know
bears?
that there is at least one kind of bear that I did hear about, but there's so much wilderness, there's so much woods that maybe it's not a problem in the towns. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. You would not have the abundance of bird feeders in Minnesota. You'd have quite a crop of bears in the city if it were the same there.
Anybody? Norm?
Yeah. I'm kind of surprised about how Costa Rica manages to raise enough funding to take care of all the things that are important, like education. What was it? Pre-kindergarten through college.
Yeah.
And they were concerned about healthcare. They also don't have an army, or not one to speak of. So what is their major source of income? Is it the tremendous produce that they're able to produce per capita? Is it the tourism, or just how do they manage to keep themselves so apparently strong and free? I wouldn't say they're a prosperous country with you, but I would say that they look to be that everybody is well taken care of. Is that an accurate statement?
I think so. I do not consider them prosperous wise. They were not in the third world country type category. They were doing better than that. And of course, education wise, it's getting better and better. And what they did was they took the money that they had spent and they would be spending on the military and used that for education and health primarily.
Was
So
that
those
one
were-
man that when I spoke about the different people, I spoke about a man that had talked on our first morning. He talked about the politics and the economy and such like that. He would have been the right person to ask that question. And I said I could have listened to him a lot longer if they'd let us. He would have had a good answer to that question. I'm sorry.
We were in Panama about 9 years ago. Just it was the 100th anniversary of the canal, and the proceeds were finally coming over to the Panamanians themselves. And their priority, we were told, was to spend that money on education and healthcare. But I can't say what the status of their army was. I don't think they're without a military, but at least those were their priorities. How they're doing in the intervening years, I can't say.
Good, thank you, Norm. Anybody else?
People
Oh.
told us that that's why the roads were suffering, was because they spent all their money on that the roads were not in the best of shape other than around the airport, the city, and the Pan American Highway, because they spent all the money on education and
Michael has two questions in the chat. Did we see any crocodiles? We didn't see crocodiles. We saw that one caiman that I showed you a picture of. That's like a small crocodile. His other question is, have you kept in touch with anyone else in the tour group? For the first few weeks, there were some emails back and forth, and I misplaced the email address list. I wanted to let the whole group know about our presentation tonight, but it wasn't until last night that Brenda, thank you, found the list. So I emailed it out to everybody that was in our group for whom I had an email address. I let them know about this, but it was pretty short notice.
John, this is Sue Williams.
Hi, Sue.
Hi. I'll put my picture there. Going back to the question about energy. I remember when we were in Costa Rica, and Carol, you may remember too, we stayed in private homes, and the homes we were in were not air conditioned. They were very open, lots of open windows, open doors, open patios, and they did not, some of them did not have central water heaters as well. Now, these were very modest homes. We stayed with some teachers and people like that. I know there were some homes that were more, advanced, but and a lot of the public buildings, I don't remember there being air conditioning in the hotels we stayed in either, or the lodges. So, that's a way that they are saving on energy for sure.
I don't remember being uncomfortable, but then we were there in December. Michael's
December.
asking what international destination is next for you guys. We're working on remodeling our bathroom right now. Adam asked, were the Econoboxes you saw similar models as in the US, or did they seem unique to the Central American market? They were basically the ones that you'd see in America, but at the very smallest, cheapest end of the spectrum. So like Toyota Echo, Fiat 400. I saw a Fiat pickup truck. That's something I've never seen before. I didn't get a picture of that. Toyota Corolla, the Honda Civic, smaller cars like that, and the ones that are one size smaller, like Honda Fit and so on. I hope that answers your question.
I'd
Well,
like to say I was amazed at John's ability to handle the sky bridges, as they call them, the canopy bridges up in the tops of the trees. And he has put together this whole presentation. I think he's done a wonderful job. He's worked very hard at it.
I think he has too. I think you both did a great job.
Yes, you did.
And I thank you very much for doing it. As I said, I learned a lot. I assumed other people did as well. You're seeing applause. Some of it is on silence, but it's still there.
thank
Thank
you.
you very much for agreeing to do this. Thank you for sticking around for all the questions. And I think that's it for tonight. So thank you all for coming.
Stephanie, I don't know the life expectancy. Sorry. Google that one.
I'll ask Google.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Good
Thank you all.
night.
Good night.
Thank you. This is great.
Bye-bye.
Louise, are you able to end it or does Don have to do that?
Stephanie.